The Open Sicilian is a very sharp opening, and uh, it creates a lot of imbalances in the position, and that's what attracts a lot of players on the black side to it. On the other hand, white has a lot of attacking options, and if black does not sense the danger or plays just one inaccurate move, he can be blown off the board quite fast. Uh, this game by Yefim Geller is one of such quick defeats that black suffered in the Open Sicilian. The game started with e4, and we get into the Scheveningen variation after these moves. White delays the development of the bishop to e3 until black plays knight to c6. This is so that in case white has a chance to play e5, the bishop may go somewhere else. But in this game, black played knight to c6 and then bishop e3. Black goes a6. This is to possibly begin some counterplay with b5. This is also so that the queen can come to c7 without being chased. a6 is a standard move in these kind of positions. a4 is to prevent b5. With bishop d7, black begins the plan, which is usually to exchange on d4 and then to put the bishop on c6 and sort of get his pieces out that way. And later this will also help him to play pawn to b5. The main line against that is knight to b3. This prevents the exchange and leaves black kind of hanging with all the four pieces. And since black is running out of space slightly, it can be a little bit uncomfortable. So that's the main line. Instead, Geller played bishop to f3, and his idea was that if black continues with that plan, say after knight d4 and bishop to c6, then he can play a5 and have a strong grip on the dark squares on the queen side. Not the end of the world. Black can cover it up with knight to d6 to d7, but still, that's the idea. And that was probably what black should have done, though. Instead, he went knight to a5. While that reduces the control over the central squares, such as e5 and d4, and gives white a little bit of time to get his initiative going. So for now, white prevents knight to c4 by covering that square. Black creates that threat again. And here the calm way would be probably to go rook a to d1 and say after knight to c4, then the bishop can just retreat to c1. And this would be the normal way to handle the position. Instead, Geller decided that that day he was in the aggressive mood and he went with g4 immediately. And the idea is that if knight c4, then g5. Or, well, g5 pretty much against anything. Black decided that his knight has to retreat to e8. And when the knight retreats, he didn't want the rook to be stuck without moves. And he played rook after c8 first. But that was his strategic mistake, perhaps, because the rook is actually better off staying on f8 so that it can guard the f file and it can guard the f7 square. So it's probably better to just go knight c4 immediately. Instead, he went rook after c8, and this allowed Geller to play g5 and afterwards to play f5. And now he will have good chances of aiming at these squares, e6 and f7. Knight comes to c4. He doesn't even have to retreat with that bishop anymore, so he just goes bishop to h5, creating threats to exchange and then to capture on f7. So black tries to counter that. He goes g6, white takes, black takes as well, and now the bishop is hanging, but white does not have to spend time protecting it. So he goes queen to f2. The threats of invading on f7 are very serious, so black cannot ignore that, so he has to cover up f7. So he does that with knight e5. White wants to trade off that piece. That piece is very important. It's holding black's position together. So he went knight to f3, and in doing so he also blocks his own f file, but that's temporary. In the game, when the game went with knight g7, had black just tried to sit and also now remove his knight, with the idea is that if white moves the knight away, then black comes back. Had black tried that, his position would have collapsed anyway, because then white can gang up on on g6 and sacrifice a piece there. Takes. White has 2 pawns for a piece, and his threats are deadly, because the black pieces are just kind of stuck on the queen side, and they're not able to help the king against the white forces, basically. And say if he takes, then checkmate is following very, very shortly. Instead, he tried to bring the pieces back, basically. He tried to bring back that rook to f8. So he went knight to g7. That meant temporarily sacrificing a piece, because he doesn't recapture back. And then this knight can actually move away. And now white's up a piece. Black has to get the piece back, so he takes on h5. And now it's obvious that white has a very strong attack. The black king is kind of exposed. There's some pressure along the f file, and at the same time it seems that black is kind of holding on. And Geller found a great way to continue the attack. He noticed that this knight is not taking any part in the attack. He also noticed that if he tries to go bishop to d4 and give checkmate with knight to h6, then black will play e5. So say if bishop to d4, then e5, and the diagonal will be shut down. So he found a brilliant way to prevent that, and he played knight to d5 immediately. Now that's a fork, so he can't avoid capturing it. He had to take, and then a check came. The king went forward, and here he could have played bishop to d4, but this is a little bit unclear. Instead, he found a more precise way. He sacrificed the queen temporarily, and black has to take that. Check. Now the bishop comes to d4. There's just no way to save this king from checkmate. It's surrounded by 3 white pieces, and in a way the pawn is helping out too. So he has to block the diagonal, but now simply comes rook takes f6, and if he takes, if he takes with the knight, then checkmate follows. If he very desperately tries to give up his queen back and pin the bishop to prevent checkmate, then checkmate follows anyway, because now there are 2 pieces attacking the king. So that would be checkmate. So in this position, black resigned because he's just getting checkmated. At the time of the game, Geller was 55 years old, and he won the USSR championship in the same tournament. So the game definitely shows that even older players can attack with great efficiency, and that the white position on the in the Open Sicilian has a lot of dangerous attacking ideas. The normal plan after g5 is to transfer, well, is to go bishop here, queen here, rook here, and attack on the h file, but just a slight variation in the position, the rook not being on f8 gives white more and more options, and here white just attacked on the f file and with bishop h5, and black was not able to efficiently defend his position.